The night of my sister's engagement party should have been flawless, the kind of celebration that would be whispered about in social circles for months, a glittering reminder that she was the golden daughter while I was merely the afterthought who blended into corners. The chandeliers dripped light like jewels, champagne flowed, and my parents beamed as they paraded her across the ballroom floor on Daniel's arm. He looked perfect in his suit, tall, broad-shouldered, that sharp jawline catching the glow of the lights, a smile so polished it could have been cut from glass. Everyone believed it. Everyone saw them and thought, the perfect couple, the inevitable power union. But I knew better. Because when Daniel's eyes shifted, they didn't linger on her. They found me. I tried to escape the suffocating laughter and music, slipping onto the balcony where the night air was sharp with winter, where my breath clouded in front of me like secrets I couldn't say out loud. I needed to be alone, away from the endless comparisons, the shadow of perfection I could never live up to. That's when I heard the door open behind me, footsteps purposeful, not hesitant, as if he had already decided where he wanted to go. Daniel stepped into the moonlight, and for a moment I thought he would say something polite, something rehearsed, some brother-in-law pleasantry. Instead, he looked at me the way no man had ever dared look at me before, intense, unblinking, hunger barely caged behind his perfect facade. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, voice low enough to make my pulse spike. I tried to laugh, to dismiss it, but the sound caught in my throat. "Shouldn't you be inside with your fiancé?" The word burned, because that fiancé was my sister. His lips curved in a smirk that made my skin flush. "That's exactly why I'm here." Before I could argue, before I could even step back, he was closer, his hand braced against the stone wall beside me, caging me without touching. The scent of his cologne mixed with cold night air, dizzying, forbidden. Every nerve in my body screamed to push him away, to stop what was about to happen. But when his mouth crashed onto mine, it wasn't gentle. It was raw, desperate, like he had been holding back for too long. My body betrayed me, responding with a fire that had nothing to do with reason. The taste of him was danger, my heart hammering as my fingers curled into his jacket instead of pushing him off. His tongue brushed mine, coaxing, claiming, and when he finally pulled back just enough to breathe, his voice was rough with something I couldn't deny. "It should have been you." Those words shattered everything I thought I knew. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible sister. I was the secret he wanted, the one he was willing to sin for. But as the ballroom lights glowed behind us and the sounds of clinking glasses drifted through the open doors, I realized that this was only the beginning of something I couldn't control. Because kisses like that don't end on balconies, they unravel lives, destroy families, and ignite fires that can't be put out. And deep down, I knew that from this night on, nothing between us, or in my world, would ever be safe again. I told myself the kiss was a mistake, a moment stolen by moonlight and champagne, but when I returned to the ballroom and felt Daniel's gaze follow me like a hand pressed against the small of my back, I knew I was lying to myself. My sister clung to his arm as if he were already hers in every way that mattered, her diamond ring glittering as she laughed too loudly at some shallow compliment. But his eyes weren't on her. They were on me, smoldering, daring, promising more. I tried to bury myself in the crowd, forcing smiles at family friends, sipping champagne until the bubbles burned my throat, but every time I glanced up, he was there. Watching. Waiting. By the time the party thinned out and my parents ushered guests toward the exits, my nerves were frayed, my body thrumming with the memory of his mouth on mine. I thought I had escaped when I slipped upstairs to my room, closing the door like I was shutting out the world, but the knock came minutes later, quiet, commanding. My breath hitched, every part of me screaming not to answer, and yet my feet betrayed me. When I opened the door, Daniel didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed inside, closing it behind him with a finality that sent shivers racing down my spine. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, but my voice lacked conviction. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, heat radiating off him in waves. "You think I care about what I should or shouldn't do?" His hand lifted, fingers brushing against my jaw, tilting my face up until I was forced to meet his eyes. "I've wanted you since the first moment I saw you." His confession stole the breath from my lungs, my body locked between panic and desire. "Stop," I managed, though the word was a whisper, trembling, betraying me. He smirked as if he could read the truth behind my lies, his thumb dragging across my lower lip like he was memorizing the shape of me. And then his mouth was on mine again, hungrier this time, deeper, his tongue claiming me with a force that made my knees weaken. I melted into him, my hand sliding over his chest, feeling the rapid thrum of his heartbeat beneath expensive fabric. He pressed me back against the wall, his body pinning mine, every inch of him hard, unrelenting, dangerous. His hand slid down my waist, gripping my hip like he owned it, like he owned me, and the moan that escaped my lips was the final crack in my resolve. "You taste like sin," he murmured against my mouth, and when his hand slid under the hem of my dress, fingertips skimming fire up my thigh, I gasped, torn between stopping him and begging him for more. The danger was intoxicating, the risk of discovery, the thrill of touching what was forbidden. My sister's laughter echoed faintly from below, and guilt slashed through me like a blade, but Daniel's lips moved to my neck, sucking, biting, claiming, and my thoughts dissolved into sparks of heat and want. "Tell me to leave," he growled against my skin, his hand inching higher, teasing the edge of my sanity. But the words wouldn't come. Because in that moment, with his mouth branding me and his hand setting me on fire, I didn't want him to leave. I wanted him to ruin me. I didn't tell him to leave. I couldn't. The moment stretched into something dangerous, molten, and the guilt that clawed at my chest was drowned out by the rush of his body pressing harder against mine, the heat of his breath searing across my skin. He dragged his mouth down the curve of my throat, biting just enough to make me gasp, his hand sliding higher beneath the silk of my dress until there was nothing left between his fingers and the bare skin he was claiming. My back arched helplessly against the wall, every nerve in my body lit like firecrackers, shame battling with a hunger I couldn't deny. "This is wrong," I breathed, but the words fell apart on a moan as his fingers found the place that made my entire body jolt. He cursed under his breath, the sound low and filthy, his mouth crashing against mine again, swallowing every protest I couldn't bring myself to finish. His hands gripped me like he was holding something fragile and breakable yet utterly his, lifting me so my legs wrapped around his waist, my dress riding up in a way that would have horrified me if I weren't so drunk on him. He carried me to the bed with a strength that made my stomach twist in anticipation, laying me down and covering me instantly, his mouth moving feverishly over my collarbone, my chest, leaving trails of bruising kisses that I knew I'd have to hide in the morning. My heart hammered, fear of discovery making the moment electric, every creak of the floorboards and muffled laugh downstairs a reminder that the line we were crossing could never be uncrossed. He pulled back for a moment, hovering over me, his gray eyes blown wide with need but sharp with control. "One word," he said, his voice ragged, almost pleading. "Tell me no, and I'll stop. But if you let me, I'll never stop wanting you." His words sent a shock straight through me, not because of the promise but because of the truth in them. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for surrender. And God help me, I gave it. My hands tangled in his hair, dragging him back down to me, my kiss the only answer he needed. He groaned against my mouth, relief and hunger mixing as he pushed the boundaries further, fabric tearing, skin revealed, the world collapsing into nothing but his hands and his body and the unbearable need that had been coiled between us from the moment our eyes first met. My sister's fiancé, my family's golden son-in-law-to-be, the man who should have been untouchable, was the only one who had ever touched me like this, made me feel like I was the one worth burning for. And as the night stretched on, gasps turning into cries, shame into pleasure, I realized the danger wasn't that someone might find out. The danger was that I didn't want to stop, and I knew Daniel didn't either. Morning light spilled through the curtains, harsh and unkind, as if it wanted to expose the sin tangled in the sheets. I woke to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me, Daniel's arm slung across my waist like a claim, his hand curled possessively against my hip as though even in sleep he refused to let me go. For a moment I allowed myself the luxury of pretending, of imagining he wasn't my sister's fiancé but mine, that this bed, this intimacy, was ours without the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. But the fantasy shattered with the sound of footsteps in the hallway. My heart leapt to my throat, panic seizing me as I shoved at his chest. "Get up," I hissed, but he only smirked, eyes still half-lidded, and pulled me tighter. "Let them hear," he murmured, his voice rough from sleep, sinful in its audacity. I slapped a hand over his mouth just as the doorknob rattled, my pulse a drumbeat of terror. My sister's voice floated through the wood, light and sweet. "Are you awake? Mother says we're leaving for brunch." Daniel's hand moved dangerously under the sheets, sliding up my thigh in deliberate defiance, his eyes burning with mischief as if daring me to stay silent. I bit my lip to keep from crying out, heat surging despite the terror. "I'll be down soon," I managed to call, my voice cracking with too much tension. There was a pause, silence that felt like an eternity, before her footsteps retreated down the hall. I sagged in relief, only to feel his teeth graze the sensitive skin of my shoulder. "You like the risk," he whispered, and I hated that he was right. Every brush of danger, every chance of being caught, made the fire between us blaze hotter. But fear followed me long after he slipped out of my room unseen, dressed again in perfection, his tie straight, his mask flawless. At brunch he sat beside her, his hand resting on hers, his smile smooth, charming, the image of devotion. And yet beneath the table, I could still feel his fingers on my skin, phantom heat branding me. I watched my sister beam, watched my parents gush over their future son-in-law, and bile rose in my throat. Because none of them knew. None of them saw the truth simmering under the surface. And as Daniel's gaze flicked toward me across the table, a warning and a promise wrapped in one look, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a secret affair. This was a game, one with stakes higher than I had imagined. Because my sister was no fool. And secrets this dark never stay buried for long. The first crack appeared that night, though it was small enough that no one else noticed. My sister had always been meticulous, the type to obsess over appearances, her smiles polished, her tone sweet, her hand never straying too far from Daniel's arm. But when she caught me watching him across the dining room table, her eyes narrowed for the briefest second before her lips curved back into perfection. Daniel, of course, played his role flawlessly, lifting her wine glass, kissing her hand, whispering in her ear like the devoted fiancé everyone believed he was. And yet even then, while his mouth brushed against her skin, his eyes sought mine. Later, when the house was quiet, I slipped down the corridor to steal air that wasn't perfumed by roses and lies, only to find him waiting in the shadows, leaning against my bedroom door like a sin incarnate. "She's starting to notice," I whispered, dread curling in my stomach. He smirked, unbothered, his hands sliding into his pockets with casual arrogance. "Let her." My body betrayed me, heat stirring despite the cold warning in my veins. "You'll ruin everything," I said, but he closed the distance between us, pressing me against the wall so swiftly the breath fled my lungs. "No," he murmured, his lips brushing the shell of my ear, "I'll ruin you." His kiss stole the rest of my protest, his hands already tugging at the ties of my nightdress, his mouth feverish, punishing, desperate. Every touch was fire, every gasp a reminder of how dangerous this had become, and still I clung to him, nails dragging down his back as he bit my collarbone hard enough to leave a mark that would be impossible to hide. We moved like animals, frantic, reckless, our bodies colliding in silence broken only by the sound of our ragged breathing. His fingers tangled in my hair as he pushed me onto the bed, covering me with his weight, claiming me again and again until the sheets twisted around us, until guilt blurred into pleasure so sharp it made my vision scatter. But even in the haze, paranoia gnawed at me. Every creak of the floorboard outside my room made me flinch, every sigh of the wind against the window made me think of my sister standing there, watching, knowing. When he finally collapsed beside me, pulling me into the circle of his arms, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of what we were doing crushing and intoxicating all at once. I was falling, and I didn't know if he would catch me, or let me shatter. Because I wasn't the only one playing with fire. And my sister wasn't blind. She was waiting. Watching. And I could feel it, the storm was coming. It happened in the most ordinary way, which made it all the more terrifying. My sister had never been one for subtlety, her beauty was loud, her presence commanding, her jealousy sharp as glass hidden beneath velvet. She walked into my room without knocking, the door swinging open just as I was tugging at the neckline of my blouse to hide the fading bruise Daniel had left the night before. Her eyes flickered to my throat and then back to my face, and though her smile never wavered, something in it twisted. "You've been glowing lately," she said, her tone syrupy sweet, but her gaze cut like a knife. "It almost looks like someone's been keeping you up at night." My blood ran cold, my fingers curling into the fabric of my dress. I forced a laugh, weak, too airy. "Don't be ridiculous." She tilted her head, studying me the way she used to study her reflection, hunting for flaws. Then she sat on my bed, the satin of her gown spilling across the sheets like a claim. "You know, Daniel has been distracted lately," she mused, tracing the embroidery with her fingers. "I sometimes wonder where his mind goes when he looks away from me." The air thickened, suffocating. She knew, or at least she suspected, and Daniel, the bastard, had left me to fend off her sharp eyes alone. My sister leaned forward suddenly, her hand catching my chin, tilting my face toward hers. Her eyes burned with something that was neither love nor concern but pure, glittering suspicion. "You wouldn't betray me, would you?" she asked softly, though the softness was a trap. I wanted to scream that it was already too late, that betrayal pulsed in my veins, branded into my skin by the man she believed was hers. Instead I swallowed hard and forced my voice steady. "Never." She searched my face for too long, then finally released me, her smile returning, polished and cruel. "Good," she said, standing, smoothing her skirt as if nothing had happened. "Because Daniel is mine. And I don't share." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me trembling, my heart racing like I'd just escaped a noose. But the truth was undeniable, she knew something, and she was biding her time. Later that night, Daniel slipped into my room again, his hands already greedy, his mouth searing away my fear, but even as I arched beneath him, even as he whispered filth against my skin, the echo of my sister's voice lingered. She was watching. Waiting. And when she struck, the fallout would be devastating. It was inevitable that our recklessness would tip into disaster, and it happened sooner than I feared. Daniel had pulled me into the library late at night, the house heavy with sleep, only the crackle of the dying fire bearing witness. He pressed me against the shelves, his mouth devouring mine, his hand sliding beneath my dress as if he couldn't bear even a moment without claiming me. I clung to him, drunk on his taste, his heat, the danger that hummed like a living thing between us. We were so lost in each other that we didn't hear the footsteps until the door creaked open. My sister's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Daniel," she called softly, the sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor. Terror gripped me, but Daniel didn't move. He smirked against my lips, his hand still shamelessly high on my thigh. "Stay quiet," he murmured, as if daring fate itself. My heart pounded so loud I thought she would hear it, every nerve in my body on fire as her shadow passed just beyond the rows of books. "Strange," she murmured. "I thought I heard something." She lingered for a moment that stretched into eternity, and then, mercifully, the door shut again, her footsteps fading into silence. I sagged against Daniel, shaking, but he only chuckled low in his throat, a sound dark and satisfied. "She almost caught us," I whispered, horrified. He tilted my chin up, his eyes gleaming with something that wasn't just desire, it was calculation. "Maybe I want her to." His words froze me. For the first time, I saw something more dangerous than passion in his gaze. He wasn't just defying my sister for the thrill of it, he was playing a game, one I wasn't sure I understood. When I demanded to know what he meant, he only kissed me harder, silencing my questions with heat until I was trembling in his arms again, my body betraying me even as dread coiled tighter in my chest. Later, lying in bed with his scent still clinging to my skin, I realized the truth that terrified me most of all: Daniel wasn't mine, and he wasn't my sister's either. Daniel belonged only to himself. And whatever he wanted from me, whatever this dangerous obsession was, it had nothing to do with love and everything to do with control. The confrontation came like thunder, sudden and impossible to ignore. Dinner had barely begun, the table set with silver that gleamed beneath the chandelier, when my sister's composure cracked. She had always been a master of control, but tonight her smile was too tight, her laugh edged with steel. Daniel sat beside her, elegant and effortless, carving his steak with the calm of a man who knew he owned the room. But when his gaze flicked to me, lingering just long enough to set my skin aflame, I saw the spark ignite in her eyes. "You've been distracted lately," she said sweetly, her hand resting on his arm, though her grip was rigid. "Is it business keeping you up at night, or something else?" The question hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. My fork trembled in my hand, the clatter it made against porcelain betraying me. Daniel didn't flinch. He dabbed his mouth with his napkin, his smile slow, dangerous. "I sleep just fine," he replied smoothly, but there was an edge to his tone, a warning disguised as charm. My sister's gaze slid to me, sharp as broken glass, and for one breathless moment I thought she would lay it bare right there, tear the facade apart in front of our parents, the servants, everyone. Instead she leaned back, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good," she said. "Because I'd hate to think my fiancé was restless." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the clink of silverware, but underneath the polished civility, war had been declared. Later, when the house was quiet and I crept to my room, Daniel was already waiting inside, leaning casually against my bedpost as though he belonged there. "She knows," I whispered, panic clawing at me. He only smirked, pushing off the post and crossing the room with the measured grace of a predator. "Of course she knows. That's what makes this exciting." His hand cupped my face, his thumb brushing across my lips, his eyes gleaming with hunger and something sharper. "Let her watch. Let her break. She can't stop what's already ours." His kiss silenced my protests, his body overwhelming mine, and though fear twisted inside me, desire drowned it out. But in the fleeting moments between gasps and moans, as he pressed me into the mattress and whispered filth against my skin, I realized something chilling. Daniel wasn't afraid of being caught. He wanted it. He wanted destruction, chaos, the thrill of unraveling everything my sister held dear. And I was the weapon he had chosen to do it with. The moment of discovery was brutal in its simplicity. I should have locked the door. I should have told him no. But Daniel had dragged me onto my desk, sweeping aside books and papers with careless hunger, his mouth on mine, his hands everywhere, his body pinning me so firmly that all sense of reason vanished. I was half undressed, trembling beneath him, lost in the kind of reckless pleasure that burned through guilt and left nothing but fire. That was when the door burst open. My sister stood there, her face pale but her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. For one suspended heartbeat, the room froze, her gaze locked on my bare skin, on Daniel's hands gripping my thighs, on his lips still swollen from kissing me. The silence was deafening, broken only by my ragged breathing. Daniel, infuriatingly calm, didn't even flinch. He turned his head toward her, his smirk slow, deliberate, cruel. "You should have knocked." Her scream shattered the silence, raw and guttural, a sound that carried every ounce of betrayal and rage. She lunged, her hand raised as if to strike me, but Daniel shifted, stepping between us with chilling ease, his body shielding mine. "Enough," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. The authority in his tone silenced her mid-breath, but her eyes, God, her eyes, burned with a hatred that made my stomach twist. "How long," she spat, her voice shaking. "How long have you been spreading your legs for him?" Shame tore through me, but Daniel only chuckled darkly, his arm sliding around my waist, pulling me closer against him as if daring her to watch. "Long enough," he said, each word deliberate, mocking. My sister staggered back as if he had struck her, her face contorted with grief and rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Both of you." She slammed the door behind her, the echo rattling through the walls. I shoved Daniel away, my body shaking, terror coursing through me. "What have you done?" I whispered, horrified. He grabbed my chin, forcing my gaze to his smile sharp as a blade. "No," he murmured. "What have we started?" And in that moment, with the sound of my sister's fury still echoing down the halls, I realized he was right. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a war, and I was already too deep to claw my way out. The fallout came swift and merciless. By morning, the house was a battlefield cloaked in silence, every servant moving like ghosts, every whispered word carrying the weight of scandal. My parents summoned me to the study, their faces carved from stone, my mother's hands trembling as though she couldn't bear to look at me. My sister sat in the corner, eyes red but burning with venom, her diamond ring discarded on the table between us like a corpse. "Do you understand what you've done?" my father thundered, the walls shaking with his rage. I opened my mouth, but Daniel stepped forward before I could speak, his hand resting possessively at the small of my back. "She's done nothing," he said smoothly, his voice steady as steel. "I chose her." Gasps rippled across the room, my mother's hand flying to her mouth, my sister letting out a choked laugh that sounded more like a sob. "You think you can humiliate me like this?" she spat, rising to her feet, her finger jabbing toward us. "You think the world won't see you for the whore and the liar you are?" My cheeks burned, shame flooding me, but Daniel only smirked, unshaken. "The world will see the truth," he said, his arm tightening around me. "That you were never the one I wanted." Her cry of rage echoed as she stormed from the room, her footsteps a promise of vengeance. My parents sat in stunned silence, their empire of appearances crumbling around them. And in that chaos, Daniel leaned close to me, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "Now it begins," he whispered, his tone laced with something far darker than love. Later, when we were alone, I finally demanded answers, trembling with equal parts desire and dread. "Why me? Why destroy her, destroy us all, for this?" His eyes darkened, and for the first time his smirk faltered. "Because she was never the prize," he murmured. "You were." His hands gripped mine, almost desperate now. "And I will burn this family, this house, this world, to make you mine." My heart twisted, torn between terror and a hunger I couldn't kill, not even after all we had done. Because the truth was simple, devastating, I already was his. And whether it led to ruin or power, I knew there was no turning back. I was the secret he had chosen, the weapon he had forged, the love that would damn us both. And as the storm gathered outside, thunder rolling in the distance, I understood that blood, vows, and family meant nothing anymore. There was only us, and the destruction we would leave in our wake.